Hey everyone, welcome back. It's been a running joke for nearly an entire year now. Ever since I started putting out full-length builds for the Incarnon weapons, I've been asked if I could go explore and redeem even the worst frames in the game, if there was a way to elevate them to a playable state. One such frame was Hydroid. I've been entertaining this idea in my head for a while now, and while I still cannot fully redeem Hydroid, I can show a couple of things we found today. If you want to use Hydroid for more than just AFK loot farm, maybe these ideas can be helpful. They might still be a little rough around the edges, so do keep that in mind. There are only two ways to DPS with Hydroid if you are not DPSing with weapons. Since Hydroid is not a good weapon platform and basically only offers mobility tools and bonus loot generation, I was much more interested in whether or not we could make his abilities DPS. The options are either Undertow or Tentacle Swarm DPS, and we will be going over both today. Undertow does percent HP damage to enemies caught in the bottle. Unfortunately, it is affected by armor, so the damage scaling is basically irrelevant without full strip. Another issue includes lack of proper grouping and mobility while in Undertow. We have access to Tidal Surge, but that still does not match proper grouping. We're also unable to go Operator while in Undertow. However, we can cast certain helmets. The solution? Our first build today uses Coil Horizon to pull enemies in one place before we drown them to their deaths. You can Coil Horizon preemptively while in puddle before you come out so you can safely set up to kill the next group. Our armor strip today needs to come from Uneru, and there is no way around this. This makes the rotation rather convoluted. Coil Horizon enemies, shoot your Primer Epitaph at them to stack Viral, and then cast Uneru Caustic Strike while immediately following up with Undertow to kill them off. The entire rotation takes about 5 seconds, and understandably, melee spam would have killed the group as well if you have to stick around. This build concept comes courtesy of Chili Willy, and he managed to achieve roughly 70 to 80 kpm with it. Just keep in mind, it does require some practice. The Hydroid build for Undertow DPS looks like this. Trying to make Hydroid DPS with abilities is extremely difficult. It is basically impossible to make a health tanking build with the slots required, so every single build today will revolve around shield gating. The Undertow DPS build uses Brief Respite so that we can shield gate with Coil Horizon. And 95 efficiency. It burns 52.5 energy per cast. We bring 2 Augur mods on our Epitaph, so 3 Augurs with Brief Respite has 270% energy to shield conversion, fully restoring our 131 shields with the Decay Dragon Key equipped. This is why Fleeting is rank 4, because at rank 5 it would not be able to restore all our shields in one cast. Equilibrium is required to maintain energy since we are not using Hydroids for the DPS and cannot benefit from Pilfering Swarm. Range is obviously important to pull as many enemies in as possible. Bigger groups equals less casts equals better KPM. Coil Horizon is the largest range grouping tool we have access to from the helmet, so we chose that today for 21 meters radius AoE. Since everything gets pulled into Undertow when you cast it, the nuances of delayed pulls, ragdoll hitboxes, and odd physics of Coil Horizon don't matter here. Just keep in mind you always throw Coil Horizon horizontally and it is affected by gravity. You cannot aim it up or down. Strength is important on the build to scale up both electric chaining of Coil Horizon, which is powerful against ragdoll enemies, and the percent HP damage per second Undertow deals. More strength means enemies die sooner, so you can start your next Undertow rotation sooner, meaning more DPS and KPM. Arcane Eruption adds into our survivability. It knocks down all enemies within 30 meters when you pick up an energy orb. It doesn't interfere with Coil Horizon, and since you pick up loot only when you exit Undertow, grants a brief moment of peace when you prepare your next rotation. Energize and Equilibrium support the economy, since 95 efficiency is not exactly cheap. Since KPM is a bit lower, Panzer is able to spread viral quills to Synset Petasis and produce a lot more health orbs for Equilibrium. The Epitaph build is a generic viral radiation setup with 2 Augur mods. Radiation reduces likelihood of enemies shooting you by enabling friendly fire aggression, so you can double down on this as both a survivability tool on top of priming. Shoot it as needed and shoot into Coil Horizon groups before going to Operator for Uneru's Caustic Strike. Of course, Uneru is our focus school today since we need a source of armor strip for Undertow DPS to work. Caustic Strike strips all armor in AoE, works on Acolytes, Demolus, and everything. It is a permanent strip. Magnetic Flare also strips shields for if you're on a Corpus map, just be aware. Magnetic Flare does not work on Acolytes and appears to be buggy against Demlists. It also makes it easy to revive yourself if you down, as free armor strip means your amp will always do giga damage. Remember that Uneru also eliminates transference static stacks. Normally this kills you at 4 stacks regardless of revive timer, but Uneru avoids this innately as a trait whenever your operator dies. You can also press X as your operator dies to bring your Warframe to that location. Yes, this is exclusive to Uneru. Remember this, as we also use Uneru for Tentacle Swarm DPS, and I will just reference this later. For Acolytes, Undertow cannot touch them, so you're forced to use something else. I brought a Glaive Prime, and I've explained this build enough times in the past. It's Force Proc Slash on Heavy Detonation. Use Volatile Quick Return for plus 3 meter blast radius and Corrupt Charge for 2 times damage multiplier on the explosion. Power Throw only buffs chained throws. You need to be holding down melee already, as the glaive returns to throw it instantly again and stack it. Power Throw is a final, multiplicative buff, so yes, it actually increases your total damage up to 4 times by adding 300%. Primed Smite is important for the Force Slash to double dip at 2.4 times more damage. Panzer build is generic, same as always. Viral Quills to spread for pet assists from Synset for health orbs. This funnels into equilibrium to maintain our energy economy, especially since Hydroid build 1 doesn't use Pilfering Swarm. Martyr to keep you alive, Devolution to give itself infinite lives, Radar, and Vacuum. Perhaps the more interesting build today is build 2. This is a Tentacle Swarm DPS build with tap cast since we want them to spawn in one place. There are a couple of options on how to set this up. There are 3 mandatory parts. You must have a grouping tool, you must have a rooting ability, and you must armor strip. Whether you source this from Helmet, operator abilities, or arcanes is up to you. Grouping tools can be done with Magus Anomaly, Ensnare because we do not want a Ragdoll, or Exodia Hunt. Rooting abilities have 2 options, all are from Helmet. This means you cannot source grouping from Helmet if you want to DPS with Tentacle Swarm. These include Condemn and Petrify. Why is rooting important? Tentacle Swarm has 2 damage components. When it initially erupts, it does 300 contact damage, then it forcefully ragdolls enemies and continues to deal 200 damage per second while enemies are captured. The contact damage is only dealt when enemies are not ragdolled. The only way to prevent ragdoll is with rooting abilities. If you root enemies, the contact damage of the tentacles reapply with no cooldown. It's hard to say how quick, but it appears to hit at least 10 times per second. This inflates the raw damage to at least 3000 per second before scaling strength, and you can see how crazy this damage can become, especially with armor strip. The main benefit of this setup over the Undertow DPS is that you do not need to be at the location enemies are killed. Once you cast Tentacle Swarm and Armor Strip, you are free to go elsewhere. Using Tentacle Swarm as DPS also grants access to Pilfering Swarm for doubled loot, namely 2 times life support capsules. This makes it much easier to maintain life support, despite this build only maintaining roughly 70 to 80 kpm, such as on this 26-minute run I did. Let's look at the build. A brief respite makes a reappearance due to a mandatory shield gating, as we have no spare slots for health tanking. Energize is recommended on this build for ease of use, but isn't mandatory since we have Equilibrium and Pilfering Swarm for bonus drops. Just keep in mind it is a 75 efficiency build, so energy economy can get very spiky. Keep large energy pads on your gear wheel for safety. About once every 5 minutes I randomly bottomed out. Multi Augmented is more for damage scaling on your Tentacle Swarm, but it's not super important. Do not use Arcane Eruption with this build, as Petrify cannot hit ragdolled enemies properly. Default range is fine since Tentacle Swarm can be aimed, and Petrify hits out to 14 meters already. Shield gating is rather easy, since Brief Respite plus our 2 Augur mods on Epitaph make it so any ability cast will fully restore our 131 shields, so long as a Decay Dragon Key is equipped. For Epitaph and Panzer builds, refer to the earlier timestamps in the description. Today, I chose Petrify. Why? Petrify is a rooting ability like Condemn, but it has 2 distinct traits. Also, no, Orgaze is not worth it here. It does not stack with Pilfering Swarm. It also reduces enemy elemental resistance, increasing the damage of Tentacle Swarm while also having a much longer base duration. We do not want high duration on today's builds because the longer Tentacle Swarm lasts, the more new enemies accidentally get ragdolled by it, reducing KPM. Condemn's low base duration makes this difficult to manage since you need to run the full rotation and kill before Condemn expires. This also matters a lot more if you choose to run Fleeting Expertise instead of Streamline. However, Condemn also has advantages. Petrify has a frontal cone cast. Condemn not only has a much wider frontal cone cast, but also has a circular disc effect around you, making rooting enemies much more forgiving. It is up to you on which one you want to use. Grouping tools are rather obvious. Magus Anomaly has the biggest base range at 30 meters and is also a viable option. The only other method I found useful was Exodia Hunt from a Zaw. I long ago built a heavy blade Zaw with Rending Crane for this purpose. It was made with Dokram, Sikala, and Varjijai too. Stack as much attack speed as possible. Nothing else matters. The neutral combo in Rending Crane repeatedly slams the ground, making proccing Exodia Hunt rather easy. Just keep in mind there is a lasting pull effect, so you do have to wait a moment before jumping away so you can cast Petrify on them. Why don't I use Magus Anomaly? While Petrify has a rooting-esque effect like Condemn, it is not a true rooting ability. Magus Anomaly can pull petrified enemies out of Tentacle Swarm, making you lose KPM. Therefore, the options are either Condemn with Anomaly, or Petrify with Exodia Hunt. Take your pick. Petrify has more rotation forgiveness, but is also harder to actually use, and enables higher damage. Basically, you use your grouping setup, and then you cast your rooting ability, and then you cast Tentacle Swarm. Then you go to Operator and cast Uneru Caustic Strike, and you're free to be on your way. Hopefully this information is helpful to you if you ever want to become a Hydroid main. Yeah. Here's to 3 different ways to build ability DPS Hydroid. I can finally take this one off my bucket list so people stop asking me. Thank you again, Chili, for the Undertow building concept. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with the Citrin's Last Wish update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis, as well as the earliest Duviri content, which drops tomorrow. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.